Hi, welcome to Mr. Otter Studio. Today I'm going to show you how to draw and paint an iris, the flower, using watercolors. So we will draw it in pencil first, and I'll show you some easy ways to draw those crazy petals, and then we will fill it in using our watercolor paints. Irises are really fun flowers to draw and paint because they have such crazy petals, and there's so much going on. So I'm going to show you how to draw it and paint it. You can paint it with me. You can, of course, change the colors, the sizes, the proportions. This is the image that I'm using to paint from. So I took this last year in my parents' front yard, and this is it was just such a beautiful flower. Unfortunately, it was near the end. You need basic watercolor supplies, watercolor paper, watercolor paints, and this is just a Praying 8-color set. Water, some paintbrushes. I'm using a round number 10 and a 3/4 inch flat. You need some sketch paper or just a scratch piece of paper and a paper towel and a pencil and eraser. Last but not least, you can use masking tape to tape your borders if you would like to do that. All right, so quickly, I'm just going to tape my borders just to hold my paper down, and I might paint a light background before I paint the rest. So I want this to be more of a rectangle. All right, now to begin with, I'm just very quickly going to paint the background a light yellow. Sometimes I do that behind my flowers. It just makes them kind of come together, and then after, I don't have to worry too much about painting a background, especially since this iris has these crazy tattered petals. I don't have to paint like really carefully around these really fuzzy yellow parts. I don't want to have to paint around those either, so I'm just gonna do it. You don't have to do this. This is optional. So I'm just gonna make a large petal. I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow to it, tiny bit of purple. Yellow is such a weak color. It's a little bit too brown, so I'm gonna make it a little bit more bright and yellow. It's a little bit too dark, so I'm just gonna add more water. Okay, so you're gonna grab some of that color and just paint in your background, making sure you don't scrub it. This is just gonna give us a nice light background to paint over. I don't want to soak my paper up. I don't want it to be wavy before I start drawing, but I do want to make sure I have enough paint that I'm just lightly overlapping my brush strokes before and then coming over the edge. And I want it to dry fast. You don't want it to be scratchy, but you don't want it to be so wet, like I'm getting some puddles. You don't want it to be that wet. I'm just coming along the edge and soaking those up. Let this background dry, and then we will draw our iris on top. Once your background is dry, let's draw the iris on top. So there's going to be a lot of petals, but if you follow along with me, I'm going to try to break these down and make them a little bit more simple. What we're going to do is first just draw these stems in. Now there will be petals coming in front of them. I want you to draw really, really lightly with your pencil, so light that you don't even need to erase anything. So we're going to very lightly draw these stems in. There's 2 stems in this particular plant. This one comes to about here, and then we're just going to draw like this circle on top, almost like a snake head. Then it comes back down. I'm going to be drawing a little bit darker so that you can see, but make sure you're drawing really lightly so you don't need to erase anything. Then we have another stem that is coming in from this side. It's going to kind of disappear after this point, so we're just going to draw part of it, just part of the way up. So just draw a tube, like a tall tube. And now we're going to start drawing some of these petals. So we're going to start at the bottom and move to the top. And the first one we have is overlapping this, but I do know that it starts on the side of this one and then kind of comes in front of it. So we're just going to draw a round shape, and then we'll add the tattered petals after. So it gets bigger on the bottom, and then it's going to come a little bit in towards the top, just making an indication of where halfway is about. So this petal, it comes just a little bit lower. If we divided this into 4ths, we're just going to make this little light bulb shaped thing that's getting bigger on the bottom. So we almost have like this pear, and it is going to come in front of this petal, but just draw that shape in first. Then we're going to come up to this next petal, and it's almost halfway up, and we're going to draw the same thing. We're going to draw like this nice pear shape. It's coming about as low as that, and it's coming in front of this petal and then coming back around. So then we have this round shape. So this is easy, right? You can do this part. And then there's one that's coming up just behind this. So you can just bring this curved line up to this line, and that's fine. And then there's just a small one in here that we can just draw another little circle. Then once we get into this section, this is when things start to get a little bit crazy. So we're going to draw this big petal, and it lines up with about the top of this little pole thing. And this is about, I don't know, it shouldn't be halfway. It should be a little bit less than halfway up there. So I'm gonna make it just a little bit shorter than I have it. And it should be bending off to the side. So just curve it off to the side a little bit. And then if we walk over from it just a little bit, we're going to draw this petal. And this petal is kind of a crazy shaped petal, and it comes all the way in front of this petal. And then it kind of comes at an angle, straight across and then back. So it almost makes like a, I don't know what kind of shape this is, like a slice of something. And then just kind of straighten it up on top. It should be pretty flat right here. And then just draw another shape that's kind of coming out sideways from it, like a little jelly bean. And then this one's gonna come out, and we're just gonna make this round shape right here that tucks into this shape. And then behind it, we're just gonna pop up and draw this really big and tall shape that's gonna come all the way down. Almost like, I don't know, like this is the butterfly's body and these are two humongous wings. And then right here, we just have like this, almost like an angle, like we're gonna draw a square. So we're just drawing this side of it. But then we're gonna drop this down almost like a fan, and it's gonna meet up with this one. So this looks crazy, but follow along with me and we will make these look like petals, I promise. And then we're gonna come off the edge of this one. Off the edge of this one, we're just gonna take a little dive down, make a little bell shape, and then bring it back in and over. Make that one just a little bit smaller, bring it up just a little tiny bit, because we actually need to fit something in here. Bring a slide down, bump it out almost like you're making a triangle, and then bring it back in like that. We're gonna start with this petal, and we're gonna actually make it look like a petal. So this has tatters and tears, and if you want to hold your pencil really loosely as you draw this, and it'll help you make some of these tears. So to make a tear, you just like put a V inside of it. And this flower probably would have changed a few times from the time that I took the picture. So if yours looks way different than this, that's totally fine. It gets a little bit smoother as it goes to the top. And then just indicate this really fuzzy yellow shape with a light. I'm just gonna make like a light caterpillar on there so you can kind of see it. And then we'll make the texture later, but as long as we get the outline right. And let's just readjust our stem. Then right above it, we have these really cool shapes. We have like an M, like an evil looking M. And right next to it's a really tall one that's gonna come down right on top of this. And then we have part of a petal in here that's just gonna come up and behind the stem. So the stem is in front of this petal back here. And you can erase the lines that we're not using as we go along, just so it makes it a little bit easier. This is a really fun petal to draw. So let's just start on this back side. So here is the side of our stem. This is the back of it. We're gonna start right up here, and we're gonna drop down, come in, and then we're just gonna make this look almost like a dress. Just like all of these nice tatters, and then as soon as we get across this stem, we're gonna make a V, we're gonna dip back, come out and in, and then we're just gonna make these nice tatters and come in and then back up to the top. And this is almost square, so this should kind of come together. And then there's this really defined crease in this petal. So I would even put it in with your pencil so that when we shade, it's just already there. And then I'm just gonna indicate this yellow kind of caterpillar part of the fuzzy part of the petal, just with this shape. So this is the fuzzy caterpillar. That's what I'm gonna call it. That is definitely not the scientific name. So let's move to this petal. Start at the top corner, and then we're just gonna drop it down slowly, just like the bottom of a dress or a skirt, and just feather it out. Come to this point and bring it back up at an angle. Round this part out if you didn't round it already, and then bring it up. So this is gonna be folded a little bit. You can put another line in there if you wanna show that it's folding. And then we have the caterpillar shape that's just gonna be coming in here and tucking back in. It's just kind of coming up over the top, and I'm just gonna erase some of these lines that we're not using. And on the top, we almost have like these cat ears, but they're at an angle. So one is here and one is over here on the side. And there's a big crease in this shape. So just indicate that crease with a line. And then we just have these two little, this like M on the side right here, these little tears. Now let's work on this petal right here. So we're gonna make a little loop, come up more at an angle, and then this is one of the most tattered edges. And then it gets a little bit looser as it comes down. Bring another wrinkle or petal, I'm not exactly sure what it is. up in front of it. Erase any lines that you're not using. And let's come up to the next one. Or actually, let's come over to this one right here. This is a pretty simple petal to draw. It's just like a little sock, but this side comes back in and makes like almost a triangle right here. And then you have this top portion, and then the little caterpillar is coming over the top. And then this is just part of a bud that's attached to the stem. So it has, you know, some different lines that are going on inside of it. You can just put this little thing inside. This will be in the background, so you won't really see it as much. Now let's move to this petal right here. This is one of the harder. Irises are not, it's not like drawing one flower, it's like drawing 100. This should be pretty smooth right here. This is just the top of the flower. And then we can see just this fuzzy thing at the top. So this really looks just like draped fabric. Now we are to this top massive, gigantic, biggest petal you will ever draw in your life. If you made it this far, I congratulate you. This is not an easy one. Okay, so let's just bring this line coming diagonally. That's how it goes. This bumps out and then curves really far in and then almost comes to like a little point. Then it comes straight across and we're just gonna stop it there. And we're gonna bring a line down from this, just showing that this is the petal that's kind of curving over itself, and another line on this side. Right here, we're just gonna draw a few little fun little tatters. Now it's gonna start getting even crazier. So before we finish this part, let's come over to this side. And right above this area, this petal, we're just gonna start it right alongside this. Starts to wave, comes down and then up at an angle, back in to this corner. Then it comes up, down and out. I mean, and this can change, so don't stress out if your lines don't look exactly like mine, or if you're like, my edges look way different. It's okay. This flower would have looked different at many different times of the day. So now we need to bring this line back in, showing that this is part of this petal. It's just bent out and flared. And this is kind of a new petal that's underneath. And let's see. And that's it for that petal. This one is the craziest, I feel like. Wow, we made it. You finished drawing it. That is the hardest part. Now let's paint this in. Erase any of the pencil lines that you don't want to use. And we are going to paint this light to dark. Luckily, we already have a background. We don't need to worry about that. If you are left-handed, you want to set up on the left side. If you're right-handed, go ahead and set up on the right side of your paper. I'm going to use this round brush to paint everything in. We are going to be painting from light to dark, but we're also going to be using a light yellow and a light purple in this one. All we need to do is just add a little bit more yellow, and we could probably use this to make some of our lighter areas. Yeah. So just make sure you have a light yellow. If you didn't have enough of your background color, you can just mix a little water with some yellow, because we're going to need a little light yellow on the tops of these. And then we're going to blend it into a light purple. So let's make our light purple color right here. We are painting light to dark in this tutorial. To make a light purple, you can just use the purple in your set, or you can make it, this purple is definitely more of a red purple or a red violet. So I'm gonna grab the red from my set, or the purple. I'm gonna add a lot of red to this and a lot of water because I got way too much in there. This is more of a red violet iris. So more of the red, less of the purple. Yeah, that's pretty close, but I need to use some water in there. So dark. I'm just gonna make another puddle of it over here with some water. So test it out. You can make it a little bit lighter if you use some water with it. That's pretty light. It's not as light as we needed on some of these areas though. So I'm gonna show you how to make it even lighter in those areas. So make sure you've erased any of the pencil you don't want to be on there, because once we start painting, it's gonna be too late. So let's start with our light violet, and we're just gonna paint, let's see, I'm gonna paint this whole petal with it. It's pretty light. And then as I get towards the top, what I'm gonna do is just add some water to my paintbrush, blot it off on my paper towel, and then paint right next to this. So I'm just gradually getting it lighter towards the top. And then I shouldn't have painted over this middle like caterpillar thing, so I'm just gonna hurry and blot it off. I forgot about that. Then we're gonna grab our light yellow, and we're gonna paint that on the very top. And if my purple's still wet, it might just blend itself. If not, I might just try to just fade it into it. And I'm just pulling some lines. So we have this light violet color coming into our yellow. And I'm gonna do the same thing on this petal right here. So I'm just painting this really light red-violet color along my petal. And we're going to be glazing, so be careful that you don't overdo it when you paint these. And then right about here, it's going to start getting lighter. So I'm just rinsing off my brush, blotting it off, coming along that edge. And then at the top, I'm going to grab my yellow, blot it off. I almost blot it off like every time. And then just put some yellow. And I'm even just going to bring this down onto this petal a little bit. I'm just going to pick up these petals with a dry brush. So we kind of have yellow and purple on each one of these petals. And we're going to do the same thing on each. The only one, like this one, has yellow on this bottom part. There's yellow on the top of this one, yellow in here, yellow on the bottom of these two. But this one doesn't have any yellow on it until it gets really close into here. So paint in those areas the same way. So each of these petals are going to be painted the same way. This one's just kind of reverse. This one has some white on it. Let's just make this easy for us and for you. If you put two wet colors next to each other, they'll just blend on their own. But if you get a puddle, you can just soak it up with a dry brush. So also, if you have some light areas in here that you want to keep, just dry your brush off and you can soak up some of that paint. All right, once we've painted in those areas, let's add a little bit more yellow to our puddle. And let's paint in some of these little like caterpillar shapes just with this bright yellow. Just so we can make sure that those don't get painted over as we start to do some of these other areas. So I'm painting it with my bright, bright yellow. Any of these little, I'm just gonna call them caterpillars. And those, I probably could have been more orange, but that's okay. And also, while we let these different parts dry, we can add the green to the stems. So I'm just gonna mix some green up here. You can use the green that comes in your watercolor set, or you can make your own with yellow and blue. And I usually add just a little bit of red to it to make it, if it's too yellow, you can add more green. So then take that color and let's just paint in some of these stems. Make sure that the flower next to it is dry, or else your green might run onto your petals and you probably don't want that. Okay, and this light green actually is coming just a little bit on the bottom of this, so I'm just gonna bring a tiny bit of green up onto this flower. Then I'm gonna rinse my brush off and just go around the edges of it so it's not so stark. Okay, now we're ready to add some shadows to these petals and also some of the veins and some of the cool textures and things like that. So we have a darker color right here. You can see it looks darker over the top, and we don't want it to be too much darker in the beginning. These aren't going to be our darkest areas. These are just like next to the darkest areas. So let's see, if we start right here, let's start maybe up at the top this time instead of at the bottom, since we have some nice shading on this one. So there's more shadows on this side, and then there's more shadows up in the front. So we'll just start here. So we have this line, and then to soften it up, rinse our brush off, dry it off, and then I'm just gonna pull it so it kind of makes these nice little veins. You can kind of see, I hope I can zoom in on this. Hopefully later we can zoom in and you can see it a little bit better. And then it gets darker along this top edge and behind this one. So just paint in this whole area with that darker color. And then to smooth it out at the beginning, just blot your brush off, kind of press it with your fingers, fan it out, and then just bring it down towards the center. Flowers with texture are so much easier than smooth flowers because you can do this technique with them and it works really well. So I'm just gonna add a darker area right here. Take that same dark color and we need to bring it just a little bit of it right up onto this part of the flower. And let's press it and let's just start with the feathering because it's darker, but we don't want it to just be a solid color. So I'm just gonna feather it, pull it in, pull it down, and make it kind of fit into that area. And then I'm gonna take that same texture and I'm gonna bend this around like that, and then bring some lines out from it onto these areas, and I should probably fan this out wider for this part. You're trying to find the center line and kind of move everything out from it. And that can sometimes be the challenge with painting flowers like this. And there is a shadow, but it's more of like a yellow purpley shadow. So I'm just gonna mix these two together and then paint this in. So it's coming just right along the top of this. So I just added a little bit of yellow to it. And then at the edge, I'm just gonna feather it out and add some more of that texture just to smooth it out. So this is a really easy way to add those veins, I guess. What is that? Is that what they are? I don't know. Whatever they are. And we'll add some more darker shadows a little bit later. And then this whole part is pretty dark. I might just fan my brush out and just bring a little bit of texture onto that petal. Same thing with this petal. This petal has a really dark area right in here. It's like all folded under. So this whole area is going to be painted in. This isn't our dark color, but close. And then we're just gonna bring it up onto the petal. And once we get to the top, smash your brush, feather out those bristles, and then bring it in from the tip. You can bring it in from the sides, or you can bring it from the center and then just slowly kind of fade it out. So these kind of come from the middle and go in this direction. So I kind of messed that up, but that's okay. That's the nice thing, is you can really just play around with this until you get the tones and the colors that you want. There isn't a lot of shading in this area right here. There is just a little crease in the petal and maybe a little bit of shading underneath here. So I'm just mixing a little bit of yellow with my purple to get some of those in. Then I'm gonna smash my brush again and just create a little bit of feathering along the sides and then a little bit in here. So I'm just trying to go along these edges with my brush, and then this one is kind of in the shadow. So I'm mixing my purple and my yellow, and I'm just gonna paint top of that in and paint the side of this one in, and then mix more yellow with it for this part right here. Kind of in the shadows, so not too concerned with it. Now up here, really quickly on this petal, we can see some cool veins that are coming over the top of the yellow. So you might want to add those in. Then on this petal right here, we have a humongous shadow on the right side. So you can paint in the shadow, just paint it in solid with your purple color. Fan your brush out, and then you can just take some of those pieces from there. And this is in the shadows too, so we're just gonna paint this in pretty dark with our purple and our yellow. Wow, we made the perfect amount of paint in there. And then we're just going to come along these bottom edges. And this one really just has more of the shading with the veins. So, okay, now I'm just gonna get some of the shadows on these areas. Like this is pretty dark in here. I'm just gonna mix it with the purple and just paint it in completely. So this is underneath, you just can't really see it. Now any areas that need a little bit more shading, I'm just gonna put some shadows underneath where these petals are right here. Now we're gonna take an even darker color and put in some of these darkest shadows. So we're kind of working in layers, and now we're starting to work on these darker shaded areas. So we want it to be darker, and you can make something darker by adding more of the same color, or you can make it darker by just using the same color over the top, adding black, adding its complementary color. There's a lot of ways to do it. And let's see, so in the top we have some nice shading here, but it does get a tiny bit darker than we actually have it, especially so it comes kind of behind this and down. So I'm just gonna soften up those edges with my brush. I'm just gonna feather it out a little bit. I'm gonna take this color, I'm gonna move it down here as well, so that this really looks like it's behind. And then up in here, I'm just gonna add a little bit of it along the top in here. So I'm just trying to redefine some of these really dark areas. And then I'm just fanning all of these edges to smooth them out. Just fan your brush out and you can make some of these lines. I'm gonna darken this up in here too, just a little bit more. Darken up this area here. So just take that darker color and put it anywhere where you think you need some more shading. And this is the darker violet, so now I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to it, because there are some shadows that are almost a little bit more brown, kind of yellow colored down in here. And at the edge, you can just smooth it out a little bit with your brush. There are those same shadows in here and on this petal back here. Okay, let's get these greens a little bit brighter, and then we'll work on these bright yellow areas. Or get some shadows on these green areas. Oh dear. Okay, so after we add just some darker areas to the stem so that they tie in a little bit. And now we're going to take our brush and we're going to just redefine these yellow fuzzy areas. And I'm going to make a little bit of a different color for that. So I'm going to mix it in the bottom of my tray. So I'm going to get just my yellow, a little bit of the violet color, because these just look too uniform and they should be kind of spiky. Hopefully this color is a little bit darker. If we need it to be darker, we might just add a little bit more purple to it. Red, tiny bit of violet, tiny bit of violet. So I've just made a little bit of a darker yellow by adding violet to my yellow puddle. And now I'm going to add some shading on these different little fuzzy parts. And so I'm just going to also add the texture to them as I do this. So I'm just going to start on the bottom. You can kind of start on the top actually. And just show that it's a little bit fuzzy, and I'm just putting these shadows on as well. So where it tucks back in, I might cover the whole thing with that yellow. Just add some more dark areas on your stems to just add a little bit more detail and shading. So the very last thing, you can add some more details. You can take a pen and re-outline some things. I feel like some of these things come together a little bit too much in some of these areas that I might just take a pen and kind of re-outline my flower. So you don't have to do that. You could just finish it right now. There is a shadow in here, so let me just hurry and drop that shadow in. Move your paints over, add any other details that you might want in here. Take your tape off and I'll show you what it looks like without adding the ink, and then I'll show you what it looks like with adding the ink. There's a lot of tape. There was probably a better way to do that. And you are finished. So you can add any other details you want. I'll zoom in. You couldn't really see it that close, but this is the iris. Now I'm going to show you what it looks like with adding pen. I'm just going to take a picture really quick. You can add some ink if you want to redefine this. I'm just using a micron pen to add some ink around some of these edges. You don't have to add it around everything. You can use broken lines. So you don't have to put the ink on there. You can, if you feel like it defines it, you can add some texture in these areas with it. Sign it. And you are finished. So I hope that was a helpful tutorial. If you followed this all the way to the end, I am so impressed. This was one of the longest ones I've ever filmed. Who knew irises were so complex? But anyway, they're beautiful flowers. Thank you so much for joining me today on Mr. Otter Studio. I hope you learned how to draw an iris and how to be a patient person in this tutorial. Post your images to Instagram using hashtag Mr. Otter Studio or Mr. Otter Art Studio. And have a wonderful day.